So, welcome everyone. I'm Alexander Mihalcea, and today you're joined by Andy Martin, Business Development Director of Dualstream. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Before we dive in, could you give us a quick overview of what Dualstream does?
So Dualstream are a security integrator by name, but we have a sort of point of difference in that we focus very much on retail, supply chain, and e-commerce, and we focus on, I suppose, what we would call smart solutions, as opposed to traditional CCTV. So although we use a lot of video and access control in particular, we usually join them up with, they're usually connected systems with other operating systems. So we do traditional security, but most of our sort of energies are around operating efficiency, reducing loss. But we do some crime reduction stuff.
Right, that's fascinating. And what inspired you to create Dualstream? Was there a specific moment or experience this part of this journey?
Well, I'm not one of the founders, but the founders were invited by a big retailer to work with them exclusively initially on some key projects. So that's how Dualstream was formed. I've worked with Dualstream within the industry as a partner for some time on those specific projects, and then joined them nearly 3 years ago to develop some new customer bases and some new solutions.
Okay, and what is your background before starting this venture?
Well, my background initially was in the police, but a long time ago. And then I've worked for nearly 30 years in retail, so as head of loss prevention and head of operations in both supply chain and retail stores.
Okay. So let's go back to when you first started. What major challenges or gaps did you see in the market that made you think this needs to be solved?
Yeah, so I think I've always considered myself more, although I was often in the sort of loss prevention space and security space. I often saw myself very much as an operating retailer as opposed to a security professional. So from that point of view, I've always been driven by improving operating systems, serving the customer better, and using security and loss prevention routines and technology to support the overall retail and logistics operation. So that's my always been my motivation. Obviously, controlling crime and controlling disorder and improving the shopping environment is part of that, but it's only a part of that. So I've always been interested in the wider sort of retail landscape, if you like. So that's my inspiration. That's what I enjoy.
Okay, I see. And I have a curiosity by then. How do your IoT devices and AI analytics work together to identify potential security threats?
So what we very much do. I mean, AI is quite a difficult subject to sort of condense and pigeonhole, if you like. So from our point of view, what the way we would describe or use AI is using software and analytics, if you like, to identify an event and create an automated response through IoT devices. So typically it can be notifying, for example, AI recognizing a bulk selection, which is unusual from a display, and then creating an automated response through a speaker, those kind of things. So what we're really doing is I suppose, if you, the way we look at it is, if you were sitting in front of a CCTV monitor all day watching something and something caught your interest, and you wanted to carry on watching, can we recreate that through AI essentially and bring that to the operator to say something's just happened in real time? We can create an automated response that might put that person off or might change that person's behavior, but we're also going to create a real-time response that allows you to safely react to that risk. So
Right.
that's where we are. So if you like, the AI and the IoT connectivity, from our point of view, is a feature in every solution that we provide, and it's our starting point, if you like. And if you, our sort of company motto is align, design, and deliver. And the alignment, of course, is recognizing that challenge that the operator has and aligning the technology with that. Designing in then not just that the technology works, but that their operating model fits with
Mhm.
that technology. Because again, technology working on its own doesn't provide a solution. And then the delivery piece, of course, is making sure that we continue to drive improvements, because the one thing that we recognise when we've got business critical solutions out there is that they can't stand still. So they're the three tiers, if you like, that we continue to
Yeah.
work with retailers on.
Yeah, right. And what types of events can your system detect, and how does the automated response system work?
Well, to give you one that relates to in-store shop loss at the moment, which is very prolific and news grabbing at the moment. What we've worked with a number of retailers, UK supermarkets, to design systems that create what we call early quality triggers. So typically with organised crime groups, they will be stealing certain product types which we can identify, and they will steal them in bulk. Um, but typically not too greedily. So a lot of the sort of violence that we see on TikTok and the smash and grab sort of thing is not how the organised professionals work.
Yeah, right.
They tend to work beneath the radar, if you like. So our systems identify bulk selection early. And what that allows the retailer to do safely is, firstly, be notified of that risk. And then secondly, identify it at an early stage. And the great thing about identifying it at an early stage is that the suspected thief at that stage has a very different mindset to when they're escaping the building, if you like. So they're caught early in the process, which has a different effect on the way their behaviour then continues, because they know they've been identified early. But it also gives the retailer a safe environment in their own environment to assess that risk before the confrontation, the conflict has arisen. And what we're finding is that it often deters, and even we see products return to the shelves because the professional criminals will prefer to move on quietly and go somewhere where they can, if you like, select and not be detected. So that's sort of one use there. So we're literally looking at how the customer interacts with product, and if it's unusual, we're creating a trigger. In a supply chain environment, we've got AI where we're identifying freight at one point of its journey, and then almost doing a facial recognition type of application where, say, it's a pallet leaves one particular site and it looks like this, and we capture some enrollment images of that pallet leaving, and we identify it by its label. And then when that label's identified again, we compare it again, much as you would do with facial recognition or any other kind of metrics that are used in analytics. And we come back and say, well, that is either 90% similar or 80% similar. And at that stage, the operator can decide whether to check the pallet for damage or theft or whatever else, or it can, of course, streamline that whole process and move it through the supply chain quickly, because it's confident that it is, first of all, it's the pallet they were expecting, and secondly, that it looks exactly as it did when it was first shipped. So that's both solving a loss problem, but also increasing the ability to streamline the process, but with some validation that they're not losing anything by doing so. So there are a couple of examples where we use video images, if you like, and IoT devices to streamline process and identify risk.
Okay, okay. And for example, what was the breaking point that made you decide to tackle this problem?
So what we do, we've got a real reputation now where, again, moving away from the typical security problem, which might be I've got a hole in my fence and somebody's come through. We've got a real reputation now with operators and senior stakeholders, particularly in retail, where they will literally come to us and say, this is my problem statement. Do you think we can marry up any technology with our operation to solve that problem? Often again, the pallet work is quite interesting, because that starts off, I suppose, with a headline statement around freight crime, which has been identified. But then we're also in a position where the AI can also say, well, we can help you with your compliance as well. So in actual fact, that has now moved on, that conversation. And this is, I suppose, where we continue to develop solutions and say, well, if a pallet's above 1.8 meters high, it's more likely to be damaged in transit. So at the point it's dispatched, can you tell us if there's a pallet that's more than 1.8 meters? Do you see what I mean? So it's always a moving feast, and we always make sure that we continue to drive value essentially from the same analytics, but used in a different manner and creating different data to support decision making.
Okay, okay. So, walk us through how dual stream addresses these challenges. What makes your approach unique?
I think we're quite unique because we always stay with the problem. So we work very much on a consultative basis rather than a supplier basis, if that makes sense. We very rarely get involved in tenders and commoditized um, products and solutions. We tend to specialize in things where and for example, the pallet solution we described, and we've been almost 18 months working with the retailer on that. So that sort of is what makes us unique. And we take some commercial risk with that, but it's a very measured risk. And of course, what you're doing through that process, you're also building up the trust of the end user. One, that you'll stay with the problem, and two, that you've got the ability and capability and skill to manage that problem.
Yeah,
And
right.
so that I think that's what makes us unique, without a doubt, particularly in our industry. But you've got to be brave, and you've got to have the sort of longer term in mind when you're doing these kinds of projects.
Okay, I see. And when you talk to potential clients, what's the biggest misconception they typically have about what you do?
I think the biggest misconception is that people watch television and watch things like CSI, and they really believe that you can do anything with a CCTV image, and the image is the image, and it can't be enhanced like it is on television, and it can't be. So, from our point of view, and again, this is another reason why we work on such a consultative basis. We also have to manage the expectation of the end user and say, look, you will not see something that isn't there, although they do that on television. So I think that's the biggest misconception, is that people think AI is magic and people think that video is magic. And to an extent, you can create some magic, but at the end of the day, it has to be a realistic expectation. And what we typically say to our customers is, this will not completely solve your problem, but we will take you far enough in the right direction for it to be of value. And we do work with them on some really strict return on investment criteria around that. And the pallet example is really good. That does not solve 100% of the problem, but it gives you a really good indication of where the problems may be and gives you an opportunity to intervene.
Yeah, right, right. And for example, how has AI transformed the approach to retail security compared to traditional methods?
Well, I think massively, because the great position we're in at the moment is that we recognise now that when we're working with analytics in particular and AI, it's only going to get better, because the learning and the machine learning and the analytics get better with use. The more video that we put through the system, the better it gets. So that's really, from my point of view, what the big difference with AI is, that you start at one place and you continue to develop and improve.
Okay, okay. Also, could you share a specific success story of a client who saw significant result using your solution?
Yeah, we can. So one of the solutions that we deploy in e-commerce, and this is for a big sports brand, they wanted to identify through video where their returns policy was being misused. And the way they wanted to do this was to tag a return consignment. So we use the label to do that with the actual return product, and be in a position to have video validation that the refund wasn't valid. And they reduced their returns losses by £160,000 in 5 weeks, just by using that method. And similarly, with another sports retailer on the outbound, which is obviously the customer um, ecom, traditional ecom buying platform, we had a situation where customers were making claims that items were not included in their parcels. So, for example, I ordered 3 t-shirts and only received 2. Those claims were being made, and the product was being sent to the customer reluctantly on occasions, but being sent to the customer. We were actually in a position, again, using exactly the same technology we used for the pallet, and everything. We read the label, tag the video to it, and we're able to say then with confidence to the customer, no, you definitely did get free. We've got a monitored system, and of course the claim is then dropped. Or even better, if the retailer does make a mistake, they know they've made a mistake, and they can improve that customer experience then, because they can sort of with confidence say, we will send you that product. We've made a mistake. You'll get it tomorrow, because they know that it's not a false claim,
Right.
and we'll send you a £5 or £10 e-commerce voucher for your next purchase. So it improved the customer service. So we're improving their loss and improving their customer service. So that's a good example.
Right, right. And looking at the broader industry, what key trends are you seeing emerge?
I think for me, the trends that we're seeing now is a move towards data-driven decisions through video. Now, for example, retailers are using video to notice spaces on the shelves and replenishing from there. So, for example, video that's linked to their stock file that essentially says there's nothing on the shelf, but there's something in the stock room, for example, those kind of things. And again, it's this video creating an automated response, or the ability for an automated response. So I think, so I suppose we would call it data in and data out. The camera, if you like, a data out project is the camera providing some data because it's noticed something. The data in piece is using their existing data and then checking the video whether that's valid. So those are the two sort of areas where we see a big link, the link between video and data backwards and forwards.
Okay, okay. And how are these trends affecting how businesses operate in your space?
I think we're seeing a much wider use of video to validate and verify a position to improve the customer service. So we work on three real tiers really. Can we serve the customer better in real time?
Yeah.
Can we provide data that creates enough insight to improve customer experience per se, and continue to develop the processes around that? And can we identify and respond to risks, loss risks, if you like, in real time? So they're if you like, the three pillars that we, if you like, from a return on investment point of view, look at.
Okay, okay. And for example, how are you adapting your solutions to address evolving security threats?
Sorry, what was that?
Right, so how are you adapting your solutions to address evolving security threats?
I think the biggest evolution for us is the way that we create notifications from AI. So we typically, in a retail environment, will push covert notifications of a problem into headsets. We're using things like in-aisle beacons, so there's a visible, so for example, if a shelf is empty, a beacon goes on in the aisle, so the team know that they've got that. We're creating some really interesting hierarchies around video where different stakeholders can see only the video that pertains to them.
Yeah.
So that's again really interesting. Where you look at a business where, so a big brand that we work with have got, obviously they've got their own fulfillment, they've got their own manufacturing plants, and they've got their own retail stores, and they've got their own e-commerce. And all four of those people use the platform in completely different ways with completely different hierarchies and permissions. So again, that sounds very easy, but making sure that we set up those systems so that the stakeholder value can be sort of driven throughout the whole business is an art in itself, because typically it's been something that's video's been very much locked down. And of course, when you're widening that stakeholder group, you still have to be conscious about privacy issues and control. So that's quite an art in itself.
Yeah. And what do you think most business owners are getting wrong when they're trying to address this specific problem?
I think that when I speak to retailers, in particular, I think they still don't understand the value that can be got from CCTV, if I'm being honest. I still think, I don't want to describe it as being lazy, but they have a very siloed view of what video is. And they almost want to treat it like a dark art because then they can own it rather than share it. that's the I think that's where the biggest mistakes are made. Are for me, if I was working in that environment now, I would open up this technology to everybody in my business. Now, not everybody can use it, but let's open it up to everybody and let's
Yeah.
see where we can drive value. And that's the biggest mistake: is don't treat CCTV just as a security method. There's ways of making it secure. There's ways of protecting people's privacy. But there are also ways of not only looking after welfare, but improving overall performance by using video correctly and sensitively to manage what goes well and what doesn't go so well within an operation.
Okay, okay. And what advice would you give to business owners who want to stay ahead of these changes?
Have a plan and include different stakeholders in that plan. So again, often with security issues, it's a bit of a we call it a sticking plaster to mend a broken leg. You know, they'll have a specific problem and react very quickly to that problem to to solve it by making an investment that is probably in the long term not future proofed, not sensible, and not part of an overall plan. So to me, it will be have an overall plan, continue to review it because the technology continues to drive forward, but have a plan and don't invest anything in CCTV if you haven't got a plan and a joined up.
Right, right. And for example, for retailers who are considering implementing AI powered security solutions, what advice would you give to this?
The advice I would give around AI is there's a lot of claims about it that are not made. So for me, and we manage this in a really disciplined way. Again, as part of your plan, part of that plan is to have a really clear proof of concept process.
Yeah,
So if you know, it might not do what it says on the tin. So make sure that in your environment, that technology works with your operating model, and that's done through a structured proof of concept that everybody agrees. So from the start of that is what are we trying to achieve? What is the technology that we're using? And what are the key milestones that we have to achieve before it's a success?
okay.
So that would be for me. Because what happens in this industry is people do trials, and a trial just means they get a free camera and nobody really looks at it because it's free.
Right.
Do a proper structured and invest in a proper proof of concept plan and hit the milestones that you agree you're going to hit. Then make your investment.
Okay, okay. Right. And as you wrap up, what's next for Dual Stream? Any exciting development on the horizon?
Well, we continue to develop our software team. So our software team has gone from 1 to 6 people in the last 12 months. And that is typically we're starting to write our own algorithms and analytics and create our own, mainly for the customers who ask us to solve problems that there's not yet a solution for. We also work with analytics providers in certain spaces, excuse me, where we don't really necessarily want to reinvent the wheel, but we might need to do some development with them to make it suit the operating model of our end user. So that's a big area for us. We've also invested in and we continue to invest in a sister company that creates hardware. So we have a smart shelf product, which is, if you like, a weight detection
Yep.
product. We have the IP beacon, IP speakers, and other hardware that we're creating as well to work with our solutions. So we're doing the hardware, we're doing the software, and we're doing the service part of our business. So again, we're developing, I suppose, our end-to-end capability.
Okay. And for listeners who want to learn more or potentially work with Dual Stream, what's the best way to get in touch?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, of course, or you can get me on my email. I'm probably the best first point of contact. Andy.martin@dualstream.co.uk. And it's best to just get in touch with a problem. Again, we don't do a huge amount of marketing. We don't have a lot of brochures because a lot of what we do you can't put into a brochure. It's not commoditized. So it is. If you're scratching your head, come and talk to us, and we'll probably find a way with you of solving that problem or getting you at least far enough along that route to understand it better.
Right, right. Perfect. So thank you for sharing those insights about you, about your company, and about the whole story. And thank you for this amazing podcast session.
Thanks a lot. Enjoyed it. Thanks, Alexander.
Great. So see you on the next episode. Bye.
Yeah, please. Yeah. Bye.